I found out my mother was dead through a voicemail, 37 seconds of static, a man's voice I didn't recognize, and then the words, "I'm sorry, she's gone." No warning, no softness, just gone. I was folding laundry in my cramped Brooklyn apartment when I heard it, still holding one of her old t-shirts I'd borrowed 3 years ago and never returned. The moment cracked the air open like a glass dropped from the heavens, sharp, irreversible, and absurdly quiet. I didn't cry. I went back to folding, because what else do you do when the person who made you is suddenly no longer real? But the real earthquake didn't hit until the next day when I flew back to Charleston and opened her will. She left me everything: her house, her car, her stained cookbooks, and a letter, 3 lines, handwritten in shaky cursive. "Don't sell the house. There's someone you need to meet. They'll come find you. Trust them." It was such a bizarre, cinematic thing for her to do. My mother, who'd never been mysterious a day in her life, suddenly crafting riddles from beyond the grave. I remember thinking it was a joke. I half expected Ashton Kutcher to step out of the pantry and yell, "Punked." But then I walked into her kitchen. The room hadn't changed since high school: yellow cabinets, that same crack in the tile near the fridge, an old radio still duct taped to the counter from when I was a kid. But someone had clearly been there, a fresh loaf of bread on the table. The radio was on, playing Otis Redding, and a note taped to the oven: "Friday, midnight, don't lock the door." The handwriting wasn't hers. My stomach flipped. I'd come home expecting silence and grief, and instead I'd walked into a goddamn scavenger hunt. I should have been afraid, maybe I was, but I didn't leave. I didn't even consider it. Something pulled at me, maybe curiosity, maybe the loneliness that had followed me like a second skin since I came out at 23 and mom barely looked me in the eye for months. Maybe this was her way of apologizing, or maybe I was just losing my mind. Either way, I stayed. Friday came, midnight came, and then she came. I had expected someone, something else. A lawyer, perhaps, or some distant relative who'd come to claim the house. Instead, at precisely midnight, the door creaked open. Not slowly, as if someone was testing to see if the place was locked, but with a quiet confidence, like it had been their home for years. I froze, hands still on the worn kitchen counter, watching the shadows stretch into the room. There, standing in the doorway, was a woman. She wasn't a stranger, but she might as well have been. Her hair was dark, cropped short, like she hadn't bothered to cut it in months. She wore a leather jacket, too worn to be fashionable, and dark jeans that looked as though they'd been through several lifetimes. There was something about her presence that pulled at the edges of everything familiar: her posture, the quiet in the way she breathed, as if she already knew this place, this moment, even better than I did. "Are you planning on just staring at me all night?" she asked, her voice rough but soft, like it had lived through something heavy. I should have said something. I should have screamed or run, but all I could do was swallow down the wave of nerves tightening in my chest. "Who are you?" "I'm the one your mother was waiting for." She stepped in, moving toward the table, where she picked up the loaf of bread with one hand and placed it back on its cloth as if this was some kind of ritual. Then she looked at me, her dark eyes steady, unfazed. "She didn't leave you the house, not exactly. She left it to both of us." The words hit me like a slap, though she didn't raise her voice. The intensity of her gaze, though, that was enough to make me stumble back a step. "What do you mean?" My throat felt thick, but I still managed to ask the question. "What do you mean, both of us?" The woman didn't flinch. "She was waiting for you to come back. She knew you would, and when you did, we'd be together." She paused. "She thought you might need help with that." I was reeling. What the hell did that even mean? My mom, the woman who raised me and had always been so painfully normal, was apparently involved in something else, something I didn't understand but felt deep in my bones was going to completely uproot my life. "You're talking about," my voice cracked, unwilling to form the words. "Some kind of secret." Her lips twitched at the corner, almost like a smile, but not quite. "Something like that," she said, slowly, deliberately. "But don't worry, you'll understand soon enough." And with that, the door shut behind her, leaving only the smell of fresh bread and the fading hum of Otis Redding. The next morning, I woke up to the quiet hum of the house, as though everything had returned to normal. The sun was spilling through the kitchen window, casting long, sleepy shadows on the table where the bread had been. I thought about leaving. The letter, the strange woman, the cryptic message, all of it was unraveling in my mind like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. But then I realized something subtle but undeniable. The woman's presence hadn't scared me. It had pulled me in a way I couldn't explain. She wasn't a threat, she was an invitation. I didn't understand it yet, but I knew I couldn't walk away, so I stayed. I made coffee in the same chipped mug my mom had used for decades and sat at the table, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had happened. By noon, the doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even wonder who it was. I opened the door and there she was again. This time she was holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I thought you might be ready to start," she said, her voice carrying that same sense of inevitability. "Come on, I'm not going to bite." There was no escaping it now. I stepped aside and she walked in uninvited as though this had always been her home. She placed the box on the kitchen counter, her fingers lingering on the worn surface. Your mother left you more than just a house, she said, almost casually, like we were discussing the weather. She left you a choice, a chance to fix something broken, something that's been waiting for you for a long time. I couldn't hold it in anymore. What do you want from me? I spat, though my voice was softer than I intended. Who are you and why does everything feel so damn wrong? She turned slowly, her eyes soft but unyielding. My name is Ella, she said, her voice taking on an edge of sadness that was unmistakable. And as for what I want from you, well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's not about what I want, it's about what your mother wanted for you. She hesitated as if weighing her words. She knew you'd need me more than anyone else, more than you realize. I stared at her, my pulse thumping in my ears. But I don't even know you, I whispered, though it felt ridiculous, the weight of it. The truth was, I felt like I did know her somehow, like I had always known her, even if I hadn't met her before yesterday. There was a strange connection between us, like an invisible thread that had already been tied, pulled, and stretched to its breaking point. I know, Ella said, but your mother did, and I think you will too once you see what's in this box. She pushed it toward me, and I felt my hands tremble as I reached for it. The air was thick now, heavy with something unspoken. Something waiting for me to unravel. I hesitated for a moment, the box sitting between us like a living thing, its weight growing heavier with each passing second. Ella's gaze was unwavering, her expression unreadable yet full of expectation, as if this moment was as inevitable as the sunrise. Slowly my fingers gripped the edges of the paper, peeling it back with an almost reverent slowness. Inside, nestled carefully among layers of tissue, was a small, faded photograph. It was old, almost too old. Black and white, worn at the corners and covered in a light layer of dust. I held it up, squinting at the faces frozen in time. My heart skipped a beat as recognition surged through me like a forgotten memory clawing its way back to the surface. It was a picture of my mother, young, vibrant, and standing with a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, their arms around each other, eyes bright with a shared joy that sent a shiver down my spine. The two of them were standing in the very same kitchen, the one I had just spent the night in, but it looked different, lighter, warmer, as if it had witnessed a kind of love that had long since disappeared from these walls. My breath caught in my throat as I traced the outline of my mother's face, so familiar yet so foreign in this context. I don't understand, I muttered, my voice thick. Why would she keep this from me? Ella leaned in, her fingers brushing the edge of the photograph, her touch almost reverent. Your mother wasn't just waiting for you to come back to this house. She was waiting for you to see this, to understand who she really was and what she never told you. Her voice dropped as if she were speaking a sacred truth. She loved me more than anything, and I loved her in return. The words struck like a slap, but not one of anger, just a brutal, unflinching truth. My mother, my mother. Loved a woman, she had loved Ella, and it had been hidden, buried deep beneath layers of silence and shame that I had never seen. My world, which had always seemed so clean and ordered, began to crack and fracture. All those years of her cool indifference after I came out, her inability to say the words, was it all because of this? Was it because she had carried this secret with her, this love that could never be spoken? I swallowed hard, unable to say anything, the photograph slipping slightly from my grasp as my hands began to shake. Ella reached for it, gently taking it from me, her eyes lingering on the image as if it were the only thing that mattered. Your mother didn't leave you just a house, she left you the truth, she left you us. Her voice softened, her expression becoming almost tender. But it's up to you to decide what to do with it, to decide if you're ready to love who she was and who you are. I looked at the photograph again, at the woman who had been my mother's partner, at the smile they shared, the closeness between them. My mother had kept this hidden from me for so long, but now, it was here in my hands. Ella, my heart beat faster and I could feel the walls around me start to crumble. There was so much I didn't know, so much I had never asked. Maybe this was the beginning of everything, the start of understanding myself and her and the parts of our lives that had been buried for far too long. But a fear curled deep in my gut. What if this was a path I wasn't ready to walk? What if I could? I set the photograph down, my fingers still trembling, and stepped back from the table. My mind was spinning, the weight of everything settling over me like an avalanche I couldn't stop. The walls of the house, once familiar, now felt like they were closing in. I felt the years of distance between me and my mother suddenly stretching wider, the silence of our conversations, the absence of words we could never exchange. I had always believed she didn't understand me, that she couldn't, because she didn't know what it was like to love a woman, to want someone the way I did, but now I knew. She had loved Ella, had carried a love in her heart that mirrored mine, yet she couldn't find the strength to speak it. I looked at Ella again. She was watching me, her eyes filled with a kind of patient sorrow that made my chest ache. She knew the weight of this, the way it pressed down on my soul. I wasn't ready for this truth, but there was no going back now. This wasn't just a house or a piece of paper, it was a doorway, and the only way through it was to open my heart wide enough to accept what had been hidden, what had been denied. I took a slow, steadying breath, my throat tight with emotion, and finally whispered, I don't know if I'm strong enough to carry this, to understand her, to understand us. Ella's lips curved slightly, her gaze never leaving mine. You don't have to be strong enough yet, you just have to be willing to try. For the first time, I felt the full weight of her words, and something inside me shifted. I realized then that the love my mother had shared with Ella, the one she had kept locked away, wasn't a burden, it was a gift. A legacy she had passed on to me, not just through the house or the bread on the table or the faded photograph, but through a deeper, quieter truth. That love doesn't always look the way we expect it to, and that sometimes it's okay to break the walls we've built around ourselves to let it in. I walked over to Ella, my steps slow, unsure, but necessary. I didn't know what the future held or if I would ever fully understand my mother's choices, but as I stood there in the kitchen where she had loved and lost and lived, I felt something new. Not a resolution, but a quiet peace, as if I had finally come home. I reached out and took Ella's hand, feeling the warmth of her touch spread through me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. We didn't need to speak. We didn't need to explain. In that moment, I knew we were both home together at last. And as we danced in the kitchen, the old radio softly playing Otis Redding, I knew I was no longer alone. The truth, the love, the history, it had all been waiting for me right here. And now, in the arms of someone who understood, I could finally breathe again.